Well, hello, my name is Dave. Today I'd like to talk to you about my Powermatic 1800B bandsaw. So I've had this about 1 month now, and I can tell you in that month's time I've put it through some paces, and I thought it was time to do a review. So let's call it what it is. This is an early on review. I don't have a year or so under my belt with playing with it, but for what I've done with it so far, I can tell you I'm very, very satisfied with it. So where did I come from? My first bandsaw was an Inca 10-inch. That served me very, very well. Then after that, I bought a Laguna Tools 18-inch bandsaw, brand new, 20 years ago. Excellent bandsaw. I have no complaints whatsoever about my Laguna Tools bandsaw. It served me very well for 20 years. But I did run into a limitation problem. As my skills changed and my hobbies changed, I took up wood turning. And within the wood turning world, you're cutting up a lot of logs, a lot of raw stock, that type of thing. And the problem I continually ran into was I couldn't get underneath the blade guides. So I was limited to kept creating 12-inch bowl blanks and things like that. So what I was looking for was that 18-inch under the guides depth. And that's what started my search. Now within my search, I'd seen these Powermatic saws one time at a trade show, but I wasn't looking for a bandsaw at the time, and I didn't pay that much attention, but I was impressed by looking at them. So I wanted to see them, touch them, feel them, and get some feedback. My problem was I couldn't find any. So Powermatic, the only thing they offer online is their commercial for their 18, 20, and 24-inch bandsaw. And that wasn't enough. It's well produced. You know, Powermatic always does a great job with their commercials. Then I found, for example, Darlington Farms. He showed you around the saw, but he was using a handheld camera and it was bouncing all over the place, and I've struggled to watch it. And then I found another video of a gentleman unloading his saw, showing you how to get it off the pallet and into his garage. And that was well done and well worth the watch, by the way. But what I wanted was, I wanted opinions from people who've owned them. I wanted to find out about how well does it run, how well is it balanced, how do you like the blade guides, what's the fit and finish, has it held up, all those good things. And that's part of what I hope to do for you here today. Now, back to my Laguna Tools saw, and why didn't I stay with the brand? I mentioned I was very satisfied with it. Well, to be clear, my Laguna Tools saw was the Italian model, so it was manufactured by ACM, which is Agazzani. Now, Agazzani is in northern Italy, and they're known for producing some of the best bandsaws in the world. And today they still do. But the Powermatic offered me some things that the Agazzani was not. I was looking for big, heavy, beefy, more of an industrial grade saw. And frankly, that's what I have. Now, to be clear, what I was looking for in particular was a much larger table. Now, the Laguna Tools saws, their tables are smaller, and what does that represent for me? When I'm cutting logs, I want, for a safety standpoint and an ease of use, to have the larger table. And the Laguna saws no longer offered that for me. I wanted the larger fence. Now, everybody offers a larger fence, but this one on the Powermatic is rock solid. It has the Powermatic Lock system. When you lock this thing down, this thing is not moving. Okay. It also, the fence is adjustable. You undo the bolts in the back and it slides forward and backwards. Helps in your alignment when you're starting a board or a log through. It also comes out and lays down flat. This tapered section here offers you much more room. If you had a piece of wood that was sticking out, something you'd already trimmed up, it slides very easily. Now, I had to get used to a few things. One was the taller fence. I'm used to a 3-inch fence, which gave me the opportunity to get my hands in here, whereas with this one, you're stuck up here. It took some getting used to and repositioning. The others is the height. This is a taller saw, and I have it on a mobile base. What raised it another inch, maybe an inch and a half. So all those things took a little getting used to, and I have. Now, another thing to point out, when we open up the cabinet, since we picked up that extra 6 inches of cutting, that also raised this cabinet up 6 inches. So it's a little harder to see into, to clean. It does clean up very well. Everything is very well made, so everything is easier to handle. But I would imagine if you were 5'2", 5'8", something like that, you would struggle to get into this saw. Consider putting the blade on the top of the wheel. That may be a challenge. But all in all, everything works very, very well. A blade on the wheel. We have sight glass here for while we're tracking the blade, and we have a sight glass here for tensioning. There's a tensioning scale back here. By the way, it works pretty darn well. When we had the blade tensioned, and we're showing, for example, I'm at 1 inch right now, and I do have that about 1/4 to 1/8 pressure on there. Now, some of the things I was looking for, it's got a bigger wheel for tensioning. I do like all the chrome, by the way. I guess I'm like an old crow. I especially like the wheel for raising and lowering the blade guides. Now, the Laguna tools and many others have that 3-sprocket wheel where you just crank it, crank it, crank it. Works well. I think this works much nicer. It's just up and down, really, really easy. Also on the back side, you can't see it now, but you will in a minute, there is a large wheel for tilting the table. And it, oh my gosh, it goes so much easier rather than trying to move that table and crank it down with a wrench or something like that. So those were the types of things I was looking for. Also fit and finish. One of my big points when I'm buying a tool. Fit and finish is really nice. Now I wax mine with automotive polish when I get them. They got a couple coats, 3 coats on here, and I will keep it that way for many, many years. All the welds are very clean and nice. Everything works real well, slides real well. I'm very, very pleased so far. I hope you can see this. This is one little slit right here. This is what you put your bandsaw blade into. So it's got the magnetic door, so you have, and the slot goes this way to the placing of the blade. But I'm telling you, just like so many people other comment about before me, this is a little challenging to get that blade into on occasion. Powermatic, that could be wider. So anyhow, that's what we were looking for. So my goal is to show you the things that I was interested in. I think they're important. So today I will show you some pictures of my Laguna tool saw. That will be next. I will cut up a log, show you the different operations in that. I'll make some bowl blanks and things like that. I'll show you the dust extraction system. I have some opinions about that, and I hope those things all help you. All I have to do now, of course, is reposition the camera and get started. So I'll be back in just a moment. Thank you very much. Right, here you have the Laguna Tools 18-inch bandsaw. You notice I had it on a mobile base. That was very effective. 220 power. This was an excellent saw for me. Here's the upper and lower cabinets. Easy access, wide open. There's the cover to the bandsaw guides. Nice saw, no complaints. Here we have the upper blade guides as well as the blade guide cover, the tensioner in the back, but the first thing to notice is the size of the cast iron table. Now you'll understand why I was looking for something different. Here we have the lower cabinet, the wheel brush, quite substantial, very effective. Bottom left corner is the single dust extraction port, lower blade guides, and the foot brake. These are the upper guides. These are the Carter blade guides. That was a very, very nice system. The only rub I had against it was it did take Allen wrenches to operate. So let's take a look at some cutting right now. Alright, let's take a few minutes to talk about the upper cabinet assembly. One of the things I like to talk about is the fit and finish. I do enjoy the chrome handles. They feel good in your hand, they're easy to clean. It's a nice feature, it makes the saw look better. Now the blade guide assembly does elevate very, very smoothly. Very nice. Now one thing I'd like to point out is when you have the resaw fence on, you do have the issue of the knobs hitting the fence. You need to be at about 7.5 inches, right about there, to slide that whole assembly underneath. Not a problem, just wanted you to be aware. And of course if you have the fence laying down, there is no issue. Let's talk about the blade tensioning system. So right now we're under partial tension. So what does that mean? There's still tension on the blade, but not enough to cause wear and tear on the blade, wear and tear on your tires, and or the bearings of the upper wheel. So one thing I would like you to do is listen. So right now we're not under tension. The blade is a little off to the one side, and if you listen, hear that difference? Now one thing also, while we're not under tension, the saw will not start. Now if I put it under tension, it only takes 1.5 turns thereabouts to bring it into position. Listen. Look at that. Tracking right down the center, still spinning, dead quiet. That system works awesome. Last thing to point out is this is your tracking adjustment right here. Small little adjustments. Here's your locking lever. So everything works just the way it was advertised to work. All heavy duty, all fit and finish beautiful. This is well done. Let's take a look at a few other areas of the saw. I'll be right back. All right, let's take a moment and talk about the upper cabinet. So we have our sight window here. We have direct line of sight into our blade tensioning. So when you're starting, you've just set your blade. You go to start to tension the blade, and then you track it, that type of thing. This makes it very, very nice to get to. The handle over here turns real easy. There's your inside cabinet. So you have an 18-inch cast iron wheel. Now this wheel is beautifully balanced. Saw runs very, very quietly for a big bandsaw. I pointed out or mentioned the blade being dirty. I was cutting eucalyptus yesterday and the back of the blade is real dirty. So what that causes and transfers to is the wheel. So this transfers to the wheel and you pick up noise, and you may also pick up that blade fluctuation from one single deposit somewhere. So that's what the brush in your lower cabinet is supposed to be doing. So everything about this, it's easy to clean. The slide here is real easy to get to. A vacuum reaches in here very, very nicely. Powermatic's done a wonderful job on creating the tension system. It's big, it's beefy, pretty darn easy to get to. So I'm very, very pleased. So we close the door up, lock it down, you're ready to go. Okay, down here we have the two dust ports. Upper that catches the just below the blade, the lower blade guides, and the very bottom cabinet. Now one thing I don't like about it is they have on the steel tubes, they've got the metal hashings going across, and they tend to clog up on occasion, especially when you're cutting some green wood that turns real fibrous or looks like real fine hair. It will clog pretty quick. I switched my wire around because the upper guide got the most volume and the lower one did not. So I switched it around to change it. I've also moved the saw around to different vacuum ports in the garage. This one is the end of my run. This wheel right here controls the table tilt. It works very, very, very easily. The handle down here on the bottom is to change the speed of the machine itself. You can move the belt and create a lower RPM. I believe it's more torque. And this is a 5 horsepower motor. So very, very nice. And I mentioned the foot brake. Now the foot brake will instantly kill the power to the saw, and it should stop the saw within about 4 seconds, it says. Let's take a look at the bearing assembly. Now this is the upper blade guide assembly, and it's quite a very nice piece of work. It works extremely smooth. I especially like the thumb screws. They release and tighten very, very easily. We have our 3 bearings here. Now these are sealed for life bearings. Ball bearings control them, and they are adjusted by releasing the thumb screw and then turning the knurled knob here, and they rotate on a cam, so that brings them closer or further away from the blade. Now the next knurled knob back controls the thrust bearing movement back and forth, so you get that exactly as you need it. And then the knurled knob in the very back, it moves the entire assembly back and forth, so you can set your front bearings just behind the gullet. Now they should be about 1/64 of an inch behind the gullet of your blade. Now let's turn this around and take a look at it directly on, and I will show you how you adjust the bearings in the front here. Okay, give me a moment to move the camera around. Alright, this is the view of the upper guide bearings from the front. We open our magnetic door and expose the bearings. So you can see that they're set just close to the blade. Now let me take a moment and show you how to do that. Again, all we did was release this thumb screw. You'd give it a turn and see the bearing move away, and then again just turn it back the other direction, and you get it within, again, about the thickness of a $1 bill piece of paper. Then tighten down that thumb screw again, and that is it. Now in a moment I'm going to take the blade off so you can see the thrust bearing in the back. And again, I'll show you that real quick. You undo the thumb screw and you use the fine adjustment knob. I don't know if you can see that moving or not there, to move back and forth to set that. So let me take a few minutes and pull the blade off so you can see that assembly completely. I'll be right back. Alright, this is the upper thrust bearing. Now this bearing controls the blade deflection as the entire blade moves forward or backwards. Basically it's designed for backwards. And you notice this one looks a little different. Some have a solid wheel. Well, this is very similar to the Carter guide wheel, except it has a V-groove here. The V-groove is for the smaller blades, say 0.25 and narrower. Then we have the flat groove here next to it, and the flat groove is for your larger blades, say 0.33 and above. Now the blade thrust bearing is moved left and right by undoing this small Allen wrench here, and then the whole thing will slide left and right so you can line up the grooves to the blade. So that's how that part of the assembly works. Let's take a look at another part. So to move the thrust bearing back and forth to have it come up against the edge of the blade, you're going to release this thumb screw and use this thumb wheel to move it. I'm sure you can see it moving at that point. So this will allow you to fine tune it. You just want it to barely be ready to touch that thrust bearing, and then you just lock it down and you're set. I also mentioned before, to move the entire assembly, you undo the reverse or the back thumb wheel and use the same fine adjustment screw to move these bearings forward and back to the blade. And that's all it takes, and that is the upper blade guide assembly. Well, hey, before we go into the lower blade guide assembly unit, I wanted to take a minute to show you just a couple pictures. Now these will be stills of the Carter guides I had on the Laguna tool system. Now in this last clip you saw how big the blade guide system was. You know, it's about this long, quite beefy, looks like it should be quite strong, and it is. Now the Carter guide system worked very well. I did enjoy it. I mentioned I never liked the Allen screws necessary to loosen and move the thing, but you'll see in these two pictures that, you know, that system was only about this big. So an excellent system, don't get me wrong, but I'm just trying to relate how much bigger and beefier they are on the Powermatic. Okay, so here, quick, take a look. Okay, we've pretty well exhausted our look at the upper blade guide assembly. Let's say we go down below and take a look at the lower blade guide assembly. There we are. So as you can see, the assembly is behind the dust door. And it's set up the same way the upper guides are. Let's move in and take a little closer look. Hang on just a second. Okay, this is the lower blade guide assembly. Wanted to make a point here. So right now I am shining a small floodlight on the assembly, and I talked about doing a lighting system. So here's my answer to that from underneath. Little sewing machine lamp. So what we have is the same thing we had on the upper. The only exception is, instead of using this thumb wheel, you release the whole mechanism with this hand wheel right here, and then you use the thumb wheel to move back and forth. And again, we have our thumb screws here to release the roller guides on the left and right. And then we also have our thrust bearing here, which is identical to the upper one, and again you fine-tune it with this piece right here. So the whole mechanism, once the blade is in place, gets shrouded with this cover, and that helps in the dust extraction system, which we're going to move the camera in just a moment and show you that. Okay, so hang on just a second. Alright, here again is the lower blade guide assembly, and this is from the front on view. Let me demonstrate one more time how the bearings in the front are adjusted. You release the thumb screw here, and you simply turn in and out and bring that bearing up to the edge of the blade. And down below here we have our thrust bearing again with the wide groove and the V groove, and again that moves with the turn knob back here. So that works quite well. Let's back it up a little bit, see if we can show you the cabinet for the dust extraction. So that's down below right here, and right away you can see what I was talking about with the hash marks in the exhaust tube and the fact that it does get clogged quite easily. And then the last thing to look at right here, this block keeps the sawdust from falling further into the lower chamber against the wheel, and that comes out to be cleaned or be replaced, which works out real well. And then if we come down just a little bit further, you'll see the wheel. There we are. You can see now, I mentioned I was cutting the other day all the eucalyptus, and you can see the wheel remains clean. So the system works quite well. All right, let's move along. Well, all right, I believe that's a wrap for part one. Now in part one we did a review of why I had decided to seek out the Powermatic saw. I had mentioned I had the Laguna Tools Italian bandsaw. I'd had it for 20 years. It served me extremely well. I had no complaints about the saw, other than it did offer some limitations of where I wanted to be now. Now we also did a cutting review. I took a number of logs. I hope the thing that you took away from that was the saw blade did not slow down The table was vibration free. Everything was rock steady. We did a review of the upper cabinet. We took a look at the cast iron wheel. We saw the tensioning system. We've seen the magnetic door. We also looked at the blade guide system elevation process. Then we also looked at the dust control systems, talked about some of its potential limitations. Not real sure about that just yet. And then we did a review of the upper and lower blade guides. We also compared those to the Carter guide systems. So there's a lot more to go into part 2. In part 2, I will be talking about the fence system. I mentioned there's a lot of the same way to do the same thing, and not all fences are the same. The Powermatic system offers you the opportunity to make numerous adjustments for yourself for tracking, quite a number of things, but we'll get to that. I also wanted to take a look at the mobile base system. We've used the Portamate on this saw right now. I want to talk about and review how we got the saw into the garage shop. There are quite a number of challenges to be faced, different ways that the saw can be delivered to you. Mainly wanted to review as well who I bought this saw from. It was Eagle Tools in Los Angeles. The gentleman I did business with, the services that they offered, it was quite an experience. So I apologize for the length of this video. There's been a lot to review and talk about if I was to do it well. So how about right now we all go make a sandwich perhaps, or maybe find the spouse and go for a nice walk. But be back for part 2. Don't miss that now. All right, thank you so much for watching. See you in a few minutes.